I stopped talking the day my brother called me a thief. He said it casually, in front of everyone, like it was a joke. But he looked me right in the eye when he said it, just long enough for me to know he meant it. It wasn't the first time he'd tried to make me small. I'd been shrinking for years to keep the peace, swallowing my pride, softening my words, excusing his cruelty as stress, or just how he is. I thought that's what family did, held its breath and waited for love to sound like love again. But that night, something in me went quiet in a different way. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a line being drawn. I realized silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's the sound of a bridge burning slowly. So I didn't defend myself. I didn't shout. I just let him finish his sentence. And in that stillness, I made a promise, one he never heard. He'd taken enough from me without knowing what I was capable of taking back. He thought the room went silent because everyone was uncomfortable. He didn't realize it went silent because I'd finally stopped forgiving him. The air smelled of grilled meat and cheap beer, laughter carrying through the yard like static. It was supposed to be a celebration, but the sound felt heavy, too rehearsed, too polite. Ezra stood by the grill in his pressed white shirt, tongs in hand, working the crowd the way he always did. Neighbors, cousins, business friends, all drawn to his charm, mistaking volume for warmth. I sat near the end of the table, half in the shade, nursing a warm drink. Watching him had become muscle memory, the way he bragged just loud enough, the way people leaned in when he spoke. He caught my eye and grinned. "Hey, Captain Rivers, you still fly jets? Or just desks now?" Laughter followed, easy and predictable. I smiled back, just desks. But they moved fast enough. A few polite chuckles, and then his gaze dropped to my wrist. Sunlight flashed across the black steel of my watch. Ezra tilted his head. "That watch looks expensive. Sis, you can't afford that, can you?" The laughter died faster this time. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but my voice stayed calm. "Some things aren't bought, right," he said, smirking. "Government perks, I guess." The yard went loud again, but something inside me went still. I looked at him, smiling like nothing had happened, and felt something shift. Quiet, final. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound but never heals the same. After the guests left, the house smelled of smoke and lemon dish soap. My mother stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing plates that didn't need rinsing. She said softly, almost to herself, "He didn't mean it. Cal, he's just proud in his own way." I nodded, pretending to believe her. It wasn't the first time she'd said that line. I'd heard it all my life. Each time Ezra crossed a line, each time I swallowed the sting. When our father died, I was 18 and he was 15, still a kid who thought the world owed him something. I joined the service, not because I wanted to, but because someone had to keep the lights on, every month. I sent money home, enough for rent, enough for school, enough for both of them to breathe without worry. Some months, I lived on instant noodles and black coffee, but I told myself it was worth it. Someday, he'd stand on his own feet and understand what that sacrifice meant. But Ezra grew into a different kind of man. He didn't like to remember the people who helped him climb. He liked applause, flashy suits, big deals, the noise of being seen. When we met, he always had a new reason to borrow. A loan here, an investment there. I never kept count. Family helps family. That was my excuse. Then one day, a letter from the bank arrived at my apartment. A $50,000 loan. My name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. I drove straight to him, shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. He didn't even deny it. Said he'd meant to tell me, that I'd have said no if he asked. I remember staring at him, realizing how easily he could justify betrayal when it benefited him. I should have gone to the police, should have made him face it. But Mom was in the hospital that week, hooked up to tubes, looking small for the first time in my life. I couldn't add one more heartbreak to her chest. So I let it go. I told myself I was keeping the family together. In truth, I just didn't want to be the one to break it apart. That choice, the silence, the forgiveness I didn't feel, followed me for years, like a shadow I'd never outrun. When I came home this time, I had a purpose. Not to reconnect, not to play the dutiful daughter, but to settle something real. My father's land, 5 quiet acres on the northern ridge of Boulder, had become more burden than memory. The taxes were rising, and I needed the money for an energy project I'd been helping to design. At dinner, I mentioned it casually. Ezra looked up from his phone. Fork midair? That land. You're not really gonna sell it to strangers, right? Tell you what, let me buy your part. Family rate. I asked the price. He named a number that felt like an insult, barely a third of what it was worth. I glanced at Mom. She gave me that look I knew too well, the one that begged me not to make a scene. So I didn't. Later that night, curiosity, or maybe instinct, kept me from sleeping. I opened my laptop and searched the county development plans. There it was, a proposed luxury resort sitting directly below our ridge. Ezra's company name stamped in the documents, the same land he'd just tried to buy for pennies. I sat back, staring at the screen, and laughed quietly to myself. He hadn't changed, not 1 inch. When I passed the kitchen on my way to bed, I heard his voice drifting from the porch, low and careless. She still thinks the world owes her for serving in the Air Force. Mom sighed. The sound of someone used to peace at any cost. I didn't interrupt. I just smiled to myself, the kind of smile that hurts more than it hides. He had no idea how much I'd done for him, how many times I'd pulled him out of debt, covered his failures, kept his name clean while mine stayed invisible. He'd mistaken my restraint for weakness, my silence for shame. That line from the barbecue replayed in my head, about the watch, the way he'd said it. It wasn't about money, it was about worth, about what he thought I didn't have and never would. But I'd learned something over the years. Arrogance is just insecurity with better lighting, and sooner or later, both burn out. I turned off the light, already knowing Ezra would give me another reason soon enough to prove just how little he really thought of me. The morning after the barbecue was cool but heavy, like the air before a storm. I was packing my things in the small living room, half ready to leave Boulder, when I realized the space on the table where I'd set my watch was empty. For a second, I thought I'd misplaced it. Then I heard Ezra's voice behind me, smooth and careless. Didn't know engineers got gear like this? Military issue? He was sitting at the counter, turning my black steel watch over in his hand. The sunlight caught the surface and flashed across his face. I felt a tightness crawl up my spine. It's not for sale, Ezra, I said quietly. He grinned, that same grin that used to charm teachers and lenders alike. Come on, Cal. You're not in uniform anymore. You can tell me where you really got it, before I could move. He stepped closer, grabbed my wrist, and twisted hard enough for bone to protest. The sound was small but sharp. You can't afford a piece like this, unless you stole it. The room stilled. The air itself seemed to stop. He flipped the watch, and the engraving caught the light. Small, deliberate letters cut deep into the metal. Property of DARPA Experimental Division. Do not duplicate. Ezra froze. The color drained from his face, then rushed back like fire under his skin. His jaw tightened. You worked with DARPA? I said evenly. And you just accused me of a federal crime in Mom's kitchen. The only sound was the faint tick of the second hand. My mother stood by the counter, still holding a dish towel midair, caught between us like a ghost of habit. Let go, Ezra, before you regret it. His hand dropped. He stepped back, muttering something I didn't catch. The look he gave me wasn't fear or guilt. It was disbelief, as if he needed to keep seeing me as small to justify himself. I turned away, the skin on my wrist burning cold. It wasn't the pain that stayed with me. It was the realization that trust, once broken, doesn't make a sound when it dies. 3 days later, I was sitting in a cafe near the bus station, nursing coffee gone bitter, when my phone buzzed. A cousin's voice came through, hesitant. Callie, is it true? Ezra said you brought home something from the government, said you were keeping things that weren't yours. My stomach sank. Lies travel faster than truth ever could. That night, I deleted every message, every trace of the past few days. I was about to shut my laptop when an email notification appeared. John Halter, a former DARPA colleague. Heads up. Someone's trying to list a DARPA prototype for sale under Rivers Holdings LLC. Check your old project archive. My pulse jumped. I opened the archive and searched the serial number. It matched perfectly with the design my team had built years ago. Classified, restricted, impossible to replicate. And Rivers Holdings belonged to my brother. For a long minute, I just stared at the screen, willing it to be wrong. But every document, every code, every transaction traced back to him. I called. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. When Mom finally picked up, she sighed. He's just under pressure, honey. Don't make it worse. The words hit like déjà vu. How many times had she said that in my life? Every time I covered for him. Every time I kept the peace. Later, a friend from the industry called after hearing rumors. Apparently, Ezra had bragged at a private dinner that he'd gotten his hands on a real piece of military tech. He'd even called it a gift from someone who owed him a favor. My hands trembled. The scene in the kitchen replayed in my head. The way he'd grabbed me. The way he'd looked at that engraving. It wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. He'd wanted to make sure I couldn't accuse him of what he was already guilty of. I opened the window. The air was thin, mountain cold, brushing against my skin. The moonlight caught the watch where it lay on the table, the glass reflecting a pale, steady glow. I remembered something Colonel Laird once told me, long ago, when I was still learning how to endure instead of react. Truth doesn't need an audience, Calliope, just endurance. That night, I understood what he meant. Some wars are fought without weapons, and some justice doesn't require permission. I wasn't angry anymore, just certain. If Ezra wanted to drag my name through the mud, I'd make sure he found his own reflection waiting there. I drove to Denver before dawn. The highway empty except for the hum of my tires and the faint ticking of the watch on my wrist. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence was cleaner. Downtown shimmered with glass and confidence. The Rivers Holdings logo caught the morning light as I walked into the building. Inside, everything smelled of money and ambition, people moving fast, talking low, pretending they belonged there. Ezra stepped out of a meeting, laughing with his team. When he saw me, the smile slipped. "You could have called, sis," he said. "You could have told the truth." I placed a folder on his desk. DARPA's seal, timestamps, transaction reports. The proof was all there. That? My assistant handled it, he said quickly. Miscommunication. She used your account, your name, your company's number. Then she's fired. You didn't just lie. Ezra, you sold federal property. That's prison time. He leaned closer, voice low. You wouldn't turn me in. Your family. Family doesn't mean cleaning up crimes. A young employee walked by, cheerful and unaware. Mr. Rivers. The investors loved that military prototype you showed last week. The air froze. Ezra forced a laugh. He's exaggerating. I watched him crumble behind the act, trapped by his own reflection. You think you're better than me because you wore a uniform? He shouted. No, I said, because I still have integrity. I walked away, leaving him surrounded by glass walls, and every lie staring back at him. That night, Mom called me back to Boulder. She sat at the kitchen table, hands around a mug of cold tea. Don't ruin him, she said softly. He's your brother. He accused me of stealing, I said. He broke the law. He's under pressure. You've always been stronger. Can't you forgive him? I stared at her. You forgave him too many times. Mom, that's why he never learned. She looked away, whispering after a long pause. He wouldn't have had Rivers Holdings without your money. My voice hardened. My money? When you sent money home, I used it to help him start. He promised to pay back. He needed a chance. I set my glass down carefully. So every dollar I saved fixing jets at 3 in the morning went into his company. And you never told me. Her eyes filled. I just wanted to keep the family together. You didn't, I said quietly. You just made sure I was the glue. And you never asked if I wanted to be. I left her there in the faint kitchen light, the house too quiet to bear. Outside, the mountains stood dark against the sky. I looked at my wrist, the watch still ticking, steady and sure. Time doesn't need anyone's belief to keep going. Neither do I. A month later, I was called to Washington, D.C. for a DARPA hearing on the leaked technology. They needed an independent technical consultant to verify the prototypes being sold. I didn't ask who put my name forward. Maybe someone remembered the team I once led. The room was cold, bright, sterile. Rows of officials sat behind wooden desks, their eyes steady as I took my seat. When I glanced at the list of companies under investigation, one name stopped me: Rivers Holdings, LLC. Moments later, the door opened. Ezra walked in, wearing a gray suit that couldn't disguise the tension in his shoulders. He froze when he saw me sitting across the table. "You!" he whispered, almost breathless. I didn't respond. I simply opened my folder and laid out the original blueprints, the serial numbers, the design codes. When the security officer presented the evidence, Ezra's face drained of color. "Ms. Rivers, do you confirm this technology originated from your team?" "Yes, sir, and it was never authorized for release or sale." Silence filled the room, heavier than any verdict. Ezra lowered his head. When it ended, he murmured, "You could have destroyed me completely. I still could." I said, "But I won't." The hallway lights glinted off my watch as I left. Its ticking was steady, proof that justice, like time, doesn't need to shout to be heard. 3 months after the hearing, Ezra lost his investors, and his company's accounts were frozen. I stayed out of every press release and interview, refusing the satisfaction of attention. The only thing I sent was a brief email to the lead investigator. "Thank you for handling it professionally. That's all I ask." Then I left Colorado behind. My new apartment in D.C. was small but quiet, with a window overlooking the Potomac. I worked long hours, came home to silence, and let it fill the spaces that used to ache. For half a year, Mom didn't speak to me. One day, she sent a single text. "You didn't have to humiliate him." I typed back, "I didn't." He did. Life steadied into routine, yet at night, the sound of the watch ticking on my nightstand was louder than it should have been. Steady, precise, impossible to ignore. Then one winter evening, a letter arrived. The handwriting was shaky. The return address, a rehabilitation center in Denver. "I thought your silence was arrogance. Turns out, it was mercy. I wanted to win against you so badly, I forgot we were on the same side once. I'm sorry for everything I cost you." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it beside the watch. The lamplight caught the metal's dull gleam. "Mercy isn't weakness," I whispered. "It's exit. Forgiveness." I finally understood. Isn't forgetting. It's choosing to stop letting the wound speak for you. 20 years passed quietly. I was 65, living alone in a small cabin tucked between the aspen trees outside the city. My days had a rhythm now, gardening in the morning, reading the paper, making coffee just the way I liked it. I didn't wear a watch anymore. I didn't need to measure time. I could feel it moving through the light and the air. One afternoon, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was thin, unsteady. "Cal? It's Ezra. They found something in my heart. Surgery next week. I wanted to see you." I went to the Denver hospital the next day. He looked smaller than I remembered. Gray hair, hollow cheeks, eyes softer somehow. We sat in silence for a long while before he spoke. "I finally learned what integrity costs," he said quietly. "You paid it early. I'm paying now." I reached into my bag, pulled out the watch, and set it beside him. "Keep it. It's about time you held on to something real." His fingers trembled as he traced the glass. "Still works? Always did, I said. You just never listened. The monitor beeped steadily, almost the same rhythm the watch had kept for decades. When I left, he was asleep, hand resting on the watch, as if holding on to the years he'd wasted. Outside, the morning light poured over the city. I looked at my bare wrist and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace, simple and complete. People say time heals. It doesn't. It just shows you what mattered. As I drove home through the mountains, the scent of pine drifted through the open window. For the first time, I felt no need to be understood, only free.